Hello everyone, this is our final Collaborate, and this time we're looking at assignment 3. Now by now I hope you already have your team and you'll be aware that this is a team case study, and we'll be undertaking this team task between weeks 9 and 12 with the final submission due on Friday in week 12. Hopefully you've already taken a look at the scenario, and I'll allow you to read that in your own time. But basically we're looking at a group of children in foundation, so that's the first year of school, and they're having some troubles with some distractibility. And as a teacher, you're trying to find out some reasons why this is happening. You're thinking about how this relates to learning theories and what theories you can see present in this scenario. And you're going to work with your team towards making some connections to theories. Let's have a look at the components of this task. So you're starting off by discussing it as a team, and you're analysing the key issues. That'll be around 250 words of your final report. Once you've made those, highlighted those key issues as a team, you're each going to choose a single theoretical perspective. So each member of your team will choose a different perspective, and then you'll head off on your own to do some research and write 400 words relating to that theoretical perspective. Then you'll come back together as a team and you'll write a further 200 words where you're comparing and reviewing the theories, and you're making a choice about which is the most relevant. You're going to look at a new scenario, so then you're going to say, based on our research and looking at this in light of a different theory, here's how we could accommodate the needs of all the students. And again, this is back to an individual component, and then finally you'll reflect on your learning. Now I've got a few extra notes, so you can take some time to read the specific details which are outlined really clearly in this assignment overview. And I've got some supporting documents here on our Padlet that we'll take a look at. Now, just before you jump into the Padlet, I recommend that you take a look at this quick video, 2 minutes long, and it's hopefully going to give you a bit of context as to how this might be relevant to a real classroom situation and what you might be doing as a teacher in your future teaching. I'm going to start by looking through the tasks, and I'll highlight some of the resources on the Padlet as we go along. Starting with part 1, what's really important here is that you need to be doing this in the Google Doc that your ELA has emailed to you. It's very important that you keep a record of the way that your team collaborates, because that'll be one of the criteria that you're judged on, that you're assessed on in the rubric. So it's really important that you head into that Google Doc and that you do things like typing in different colours, recording different team members' tasks, highlighting ways that you've worked together, and that you show that you've really discussed this as a team, that it hasn't been a quick decision. So do make sure that you're working together in that Google Doc to collate your evidence of collaboration. And you might identify a few key issues as a team, keeping in mind that you only have 250 words, so it's going to have to be fairly succinct. And as a team, if you're getting stuck on what you should be discussing, we've got a few ideas here outlined for what you could be discussing. Some strategies, the learning environment, the different teaching styles, the relationships between the stakeholders, what's evident in that scenario, and why are those the issues that you're focusing in on as a team. And the academic research and literature is really important. Make sure that throughout this report, this case study report, that you are making citations to the readings that you've been doing. And of course, just like the other assignments, we're expecting you to use the unit learning materials, the texts that you've been reading as part of the unit, as well as integrating your own research in there. So part 1, you're coming out with your 250 words, and every team member is going to submit exactly the same 250 words. So it's important that in your Google Doc, you come up with your 250 word analysis, and then each team member is going to copy and paste that into their report. This bit will be exactly the same for every team member. As I mentioned, then you're going to consider different theoretical perspectives. So each of you will select a theory, and please aim to use the unit theories, the ones that we've covered. In the frequently asked questions, we do mention that if you are desperate to cover a different theory, you can run it past your ELA. But really, for the best chance of success, we suggest that you stick with these theories that we've covered in the unit. You explore how you view the scenario. So we're looking at descriptions and examples and linking the scenario to the learning theory that you've been exploring. This is really important to be able to demonstrate your understanding when you can match theory with practice, and you'll see that happen a few times throughout this assignment. You might be outlining this perspective, focusing on the theory, not the theorist. You might use it to analyse the scenario, and you'll consider approaches that this theory takes to support learning. So you might be saying one of the key issues we identified was, and you're going to be talking about how the theory can support that particular key issue. So you're really championing your theory here. This is the main bulk of your assignment. It's 400 words, and it's the individual task. So it's where you get another chance to either explore the theory that you looked at in your essay, or expand your learning by looking at a different theory. I think I'd be looking at a different theory, but it just depends on where you're at and what your team is focusing on. You might end up having to extend your ideas and go for something that you haven't seen before. Okay, and then we're coming back together in part 3. And it's really important before you tackle part 3 that every member of your team has completed part 2. It is designed to be sequential, and that you need to have that background understanding and your clear identification of your points before you move on to part 3 as a team again. Now, you're going to choose a theory as a team, and there's no right or wrong theory. We're not going to mark you down because you've chosen this theory and we think that that theory is better. There's no right or wrong theory, only strong or weak justifications. So your team's writing 200 words justifying your choice, and you're comparing the different theoretical perspectives. You're saying this one has strengths, this one has weaknesses. We think that this is the best choice for this scenario. And it's going to meet the needs of the teachers and the students, particularly the students, I suppose. There's going to need to be evidence of your discussion here. So we don't just want, in your Google Doc, we don't just want the 200 words. We want some discussion going on that shows how your team came to this conclusion. Now let's talk a little bit about those screenshots, because we've talked about 2 team tasks here. You'll see that we don't have an exemplar There we go. But we do have some examples of what your evidence of collaboration might look like. So it might be using your Google Doc to show the timeline that you've set up and the way that you've collaborated. So you can see that this team's chosen to use an online collaborate session. This team might have been using some sort of a messenger service. You've talked about the roles that are present. So we're really looking to see some sort of chat, discussion, or a different way of collaborating, and to make sure that you are sharing your ideas. You can do this via email, you can do it via any sort of messenger apps. We don't care how you collaborate, just so long as you keep some records of that and show how you've collaborated. You can use a telephone, or if you're close enough, you can even meet up in person. Any form of collaboration is acceptable. We also have a suggested timeline because we know that you've got about 3 weeks to get this together once you finish off your essay. And we suggest that you've finished the first part by week 9, your individual component by the end of week 10, that you tackle the second team component in week 11, and that gives you most of week 12 to be able to finish off your final reflection and parts 4 and 5. As you know, this part 2 is where most of your research will be happening, and here it's really pulling it together at the end. So we think that this is a reasonably achievable timeline, and of course you need to negotiate that with your team to find out whether that's something that everyone can be on board with, and whether you need to be a bit flexible and move this to the Sunday night, or whether you need to have it finished a little bit earlier for some team members. Now, as I said, there are meeting rooms set up in our Collaborate space. So if you head into the unit and you go to Collaborate, you'll be able to find a number of rooms and meet together in there. And that's just a matter of saying, hey team, let's get together in room 3 on Wednesday at 8 p.m. and we'll discuss our part 2 in there. When you're in there, we suggest that you do take some screenshots just to show that you were present at that time, or that you used the chat lounge, or that you used some video functions, any sort of evidence just to show how you collaborated in there. Or similarly, you might be choosing different colours. Say I'm the pink font and you're the green font and somebody else is the blue font, and we're going to keep our discussion going via those fonts inside the Google Doc. Those are just a few ideas. As I said, any form of collaboration is acceptable for this task. Okay, so we've got our team tasks. We've got a bit of an idea about how that's going. Just before I move on, I'm going to take a quick look at the rubric which relates to these team tasks. So I'll go back in a moment and look again at the rubric, but in this particular slide, I just want to highlight that it's the execution of team collaboration. So how do you design how you're going to work as a team? How do you come up with a team contract? How do you work on your team timeline? How have you executed that? So how have you actually worked together and problem solved your issues and communicated as a team? That's worth 20% of this grade. So it's quite a fair chunk of this assignment. And we won't see any of those things inside tasks 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We're only going to see it in your appendix with your screenshots. So the screenshots need to be able to speak for themselves, and they need to be able to show you collaboration in that screenshot and the way that you worked to design and execute your team. And they need to take up no more than 2 pages. So we just need a really quick screenshot, a quick overview of how your team worked together. We need to show that you've got a way to share your knowledge, work together, collaborate, and this will also look at how your team parts come together and show that you've worked together as a team, and how well it's written and how well it's composed. Okay, I am jumping around a bit, but hopefully this is making sense. So let's just look again at our assignment page and the criteria. So for this criteria, you can see that the analysis, that first section, is given 10% of the overall grade. So 200 words, it's only a very small component. Get that out of the way quickly and head off to do your own research. This is a combination of parts 2 and 3. So the way that you describe the theoretical perspectives and the way that you compare and choose a perspective, highlighting the specific features of that perspective and backing that up with research and linking that to the scenario, the way that these align with the scenario. All of those things contribute to the main part of your grade. That's 30%. And you can see that that's outlined in the rubric here. Then this is back to your individual task, part 4. So part 4 will be assessed based on this criterion. Here is your team execution, the way that you work as a team, again 20%. And the final part, which is your reflection, is only 10% of the grade. So you can see that a big part is really focused on, do you understand the theories, and can you apply the theories to this scenario, and can you link them to teaching and learning strategies which relate to that scenario? That's the main focus. How you work as a team is going to be a big focus, and how you link that scenario again to the strategies is all going to contribute to your grade. Then of course we always make APA something that we're going to be assessing you on, and as a team hopefully you'll be able to support each other with things like referencing, spelling and grammar and expression, and all of these will contribute to your grade. Now it doesn't say here whether that's team or individual because it's a combination of your entire report. So if your team components are really well composed and well cited and referenced, but your individual components aren't quite so polished, then you might be getting a different score for this part of your grade compared to the rest of your team. So this will take into account your team achievement, but it will also be based on your own skills in this area. So we've covered the team components. We've talked a bit about how we're collaborating, how we're getting our evidence. Let's just look back at parts 4 and 5 because we haven't really explored them in detail yet. So in part 4 you will take on a new scenario and you'll look at meeting the needs of all the children. So there's some gaps in the existing scenario where one child in particular is struggling in that setting. So how will you be able to use some teaching tools and strategies and a different theory so that all the children will be thriving in that setting? And how can you describe the scenario, including all those children, so that there is a better way to meet the needs of all the children? So there you've got your 300 words again. You're going to be linking into the theoretical perspective with research, and you're going to be explaining a new scenario where all the children are are better catered for. And then we move on to the final part, part 5, 350 words, so a little bit longer than what you've been using in some of the other tasks. And it's reflecting not only on this assignment, but more broadly on the unit. How is your understanding of theory developed? And it's looking at two things. So it's looking at the theories, it's looking at your learning in general, but it's also looking at the way that the team task has supported your learning and how you can reflect on your work as part of a team. There will be definite strengths and benefits of these team tasks, and there'll be some challenges along the way, and that might give you some something really meaty to reflect on. So the other thing to highlight is that throughout all of these sections, you will be citing your research. Make sure that each part, when you submit it, has some citations in it towards your readings and your research, and making sure that you're making those connections back to the published authors who are informing your understanding. So do make sure that each section does cite research. Okay, now one of the frequently asked questions that I wanted to highlight is, which chosen perspective do I explore in part 4? So I'm writing the new scenario. What perspective or theory do I base it on when I'm writing part 4? So this case study is meant to flow from one part to the next, building upon each other. So it makes sense that given your team believes in X theory and you've chosen that in part 3, that you then follow on in part 4 with that chosen theory, even if it's not the theoretical perspective that you chose in part 2. So hopefully that makes sense. It's not going to be a disaster if you do end up going back to your theory here, but it does make sense that you move ahead and keep going with the theory that you've argued for in part 3. Okay, do take some time to head through the frequently asked questions. Things like how to set out my work, and do I include headings, and how do I manage the word count. They're all covered in here. And hopefully you'll be able to find the answers that you need inside that section. We do have a template that you can use. Again, it's just a suggested template, but it has all the headings included already, and it has a reference list and an appendix in there that can just make your finishing up of this essay a little bit, this case study, a little bit more straightforward. You can just plonk your information straight in there without having to worry about formatting. So hopefully that supports you as well. I do want to really highlight these resources in the student portal. As you start to get together with your team, we really encourage you to do things like develop a team contract, get your timeline in order with your team. These are all the things that you'll be doing in week 8 and week 9. Hopefully it's all set up by week 9. Or at the start of week 9, you're really documenting those team processes, making a really solid understanding, solid grounding, so that when you get up to criterion 5, where did it go to? Criterion 4, that you'll be heading towards this high distinction. You'll have lots of evidence of collaborative team participation. You'll have really strong design of your teamwork and how you're going to work as a team. And this will lead to a well-written report and good sharing of ideas. So spending time in week 8 and 9 setting up that groundwork is going to make a huge difference to the way that your team runs together throughout the next few weeks. Okay, that's it for me tonight, everyone. We encourage you to join in onto our live session. In that live session, we're going to be just running through some of the key things. So we'll be looking at some of the key issues for part 1. We'll be considering some different perspectives. We'll possibly talk through some new scenarios that we could be using. So just giving you those brainstorming opportunities to work together with the whole group, and then you can head back to your team and start to nut it out with your smaller team. We hope that you'll be able to join us next week for those live sessions, and we wish you all the very best for this team task. And remember, we're there to support you. So please do get in touch with any challenges with your teamwork. We're here to help this to be a really smooth and productive process for you. Thanks, everyone.